Welcome back to World History, where the past comes alive. Today, we're diving into a moment that quite literally changed the world with ink, and heralded the birth of the printing press. In the quiet workshop of Mainz, Germany, a man named Johannes Gutenberg was on the brink of revolution. Surrounded by wooden tools and shimmering metal type, he was assembling the world's first movable type printing press, a machine that would crack open the gates of knowledge. The first sheets rolled through the press with trembling hands and pounding hearts. The Gutenberg Bible, meticulously printed, page by page, emerged as the first mass-produced book in European history. Ink met paper not as art, but as a system of technology that made information repeatable, scalable, and powerful. Zoom in on the metal type. Tiny, perfect blocks of individual letters arranged inside a frame. This innovation allowed printers to rearrange, reset, and reuse letters with ease. It wasn't just clever, it was efficient, and it would soon ignite an information explosion. Monks and scribes had once held a sacred monopoly on writing. Now, with the rise of Gutenberg's press, their candle-lit scriptoriums looked like relics of a fading era. Shock, disbelief, and even resistance rippled through religious communities as the press threatened centuries of tradition. One side shows a hand-painted, labor-intensive manuscript. The other, a printed page, clean, sharp, and perfectly duplicated. The contrast was more than aesthetic. It marked the divide between a world of privilege and one of potential access for all. As printing spread, townsfolk gathered in crowded marketplaces, curiously examining cheap, printed pamphlets and flyers. What once belonged only to scholars and nobles was now in the hands of merchants, farmers, even servants. The world was waking up. In classrooms, young scholars eagerly flipped through printed books, their eyes wide with excitement. Suddenly, learning wasn't bound by availability, it was limited only by curiosity. The classroom was no longer a space of silence, but one of sparks and debate. Imagine a peasant holding a printed flyer under flickering candlelight, perhaps. The first time they'd ever read something not spoken by a priest. The printing press gave the voiceless a voice, the powerless a tool, and the curious a window to the wider world. In backroom workshops, presses clanked and hissed as laborers cranked out pages by the thousands. The scale was staggering. A single press could produce more books in a week than a scribe could in a year. Knowledge was no longer trickling, it was flooding. Merchants loaded bags full of printed books, taking them across Europe by horse and cart. These weren't just trade goods. They were carriers of language, science, poetry, and revolution. Books no longer belonged to castles and cathedrals, they now journeyed with common people, shaping ideas far beyond their origin. As the printing press spread like wildfire, so too did new and dangerous ideas. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther walked to the castle church in Wittenberg and nailed a document to the door. It was his famous 95 Theses, a blistering critique of the Catholic Church. But this wasn't just a single act of defiance. It was the beginning of a media storm. Thanks to the printing press, thousands of copies were distributed across Europe in just weeks. The age of religious obedience was over. The age of questioning had begun. In village squares and candle-lit homes, people gathered to read Luther's words aloud. Some cried in agreement, others shouted in rage. Suddenly, religion wasn't just heard in Latin sermons, it was printed in local languages. The Reformation wasn't powered by swords or soldiers, it was driven by ink, paper, and ordinary people. Empowered to think for themselves, this new wave of printed criticism shook the halls of power. Kings, queens, and popes found themselves battling ideas they couldn't contain. Pamphlets criticized governments. Books challenged monarchs. Satirical cartoons mocked religious figures. Where once dissent meant whispers in the dark, now it meant full pages and bold headlines, and so the backlash began. Book burnings became common. Religious leaders declared war on heretical printers. In town squares, stacks of banned books were torched, their ashes rising like the last breath of old ideas. But no matter how many copies they burned, more would appear. The press had made ideas immortal. Underground printing shops emerged in cities like Paris, Antwerp, and London. These hidden workshops, lit by oil lamps and guarded by secrecy, became the beating heart of resistance. Dangerous books were printed under the noses of kings and bishops, the more they tried to silence. The press, the louder it, in classrooms far from the chaos, the next generation of thinkers was forming. Children sat wide-eyed, learning not just to read, but to think critically. For the first time, books were affordable. Education was no longer a privilege, it was a birthright. The printing press laid the foundation for future revolutions. Word by word, in the world of science, this new technology became a megaphone. Thinkers like Galileo and Newton didn't have to wait decades to share discoveries. Their diagrams, theories, and observations were printed, copied, and shipped across borders. Knowledge could now evolve collectively, not in isolated whispers. The printing press turned Europe into a living brain, each city a neuron, each book a synapse. From Florence to Frankfurt, scholars debated, refined, and published. It was as if electricity had struck the human mind. Knowledge flowed like never before, creating sparks of brilliance that lit the path to modernity. In salons and coffeehouses, intellectuals pored over books that challenged tradition and proposed bold new visions of society. They read Voltaire, Rousseau, and Locke-printed voices that questioned kings and uplifted the individual. The Enlightenment wasn't just an age, it was a printed revolution. In workshops cluttered with paper and possibility. Inventors studied blueprints and maps fresh from the press. Every invention was born twice, first in the mind and then on the printed page. It was a world where progress no longer waited for permission. It simply published itself and moved forward. As Europe embraced the printing press, its influence didn't stay confined to the West. The technology crossed borders and oceans. In the grand cities of the Islamic world, in bustling ports across Asia, and in the scholarly courts of the Far East, the press arrived with intrigue and potential. Local scribes, calligraphers, and rulers stood in awe of this strange mechanical device that could produce pages faster than hands ever could. It wasn't just a Western invention anymore, it was becoming a global tool. By the 19th century, the press had transformed yet again. Now, powered by steam and steel, massive machines roared in vast industrial printing houses. Pages flew out at lightning speed, printing newspapers, novels, and journals for millions. What Gutenberg had started with a hand crank had now evolved into a powerful engine for mass communication. Imagine the morning rush in a 19th century city, freshly printed newspapers being thrown onto wooden carts, boys shouting headlines in the streets. The world had never been more connected. News didn't take months, it took minutes. The printing press had evolved into the daily heartbeat of modern society. In a stunning leap through time, the mechanical press began to merge with the digital age. Printers evolved into digital copiers, and books turned into e-books. The transformation wasn't just in form, it was in speed, reach, and impact. A story once printed on paper now lived in the cloud, accessible to millions with a tap. The spirit of Gutenberg lived on, just in a new language. Binary code, picture a young child in the present day, holding a book in one hand and a tablet in the other. One foot in the past, one in the future. The printing press didn't disappear, it simply expanded. What mattered wasn't the tool, but the spark it created, a thirst for knowledge, for connection, for truth. Now imagine a surreal scene, a glowing printing press radiating beams of light labeled freedom, education, and revolution. It's not just a machine anymore, it's a symbol of every movement that ever demanded truth over silence. Every step society took toward progress had ink in its footprints. Books now fly across the world, literally and figuratively. From tiny print shops to global publishers, words travel across continents in seconds. Printed literature has become humanity's wings, lifting voices from every corner of the globe and sharing stories once trapped by distance and language. Look closer at the shelves of a modern library. and you'll see more than paper. You'll see history, the Gutenberg Bible, Origin of Species, the Communist Manifesto, the Rights of Man, and countless others. Every one of these books once rolled off a press and into the world like a spark ready to ignite change, asterisk in city squares. And public parks, statues of Gutenberg now stand tall, sometimes made entirely of books. Around them sit students, poets, historians all reading, learning, and reflecting. The man who once melted metal to form letters had forged something far greater, a pathway to understanding asterisk, and finally, in the digital age, imagine a room not filled with books, but with floating, printed words, hovering, glowing, eternal. The printing press didn't just change how we read. It changed how we think, how we speak, and how we remember. In every chapter of progress, in every revolution, the press was there quietly pressing forward.